is an appetite from the public for this to go on and on and on.
Well, the first question is whether will the police do it? I think that what they've got to decide, you're absolutely right, that they did look into it first time round. They decided there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute. Now the video has come to light, they may well think again. The question the police have to ask themselves is, would it be in the public interest to launch another time-consuming, expensive investigation into this? Or, as you say, do we simply move on? But that's sort of an operational matter for the police. The Tories at the time were obviously quite convinced this party had broken the rules because 4 people who were at it were disciplined for doing so. And in answer to the second question, should we move on? Well, I think that I'd be guided by the police on this. If they think it's worth a long, timely investigation, that's up to them. I'm inclined to think that probably as we near the election, there will be things more uppermost in people's minds, like their mortgages, the cost of living, maybe even climate change. I
just think, and sorry to interrupt, Nigel, but I just think there's so much double standards at the moment because, of course, Keir Starmer, he was potentially implicated in what was considered by some to be a little bit of a party up in Durham, Cormer, Beergate, whatever you want to call it. Then we've got Bernard Jenkin, who sat on the Privileges Committee that is doing this party inquiry into Boris Johnson that we're going to see debated in the Commons tomorrow. It does seem everyone was at it.
Well, it does seem there's been a bit of bad behaviour going on all over the place.
Well, does that make it less bad? Does that make it harder for people to single out these individuals in this video when it seems as though these sorts of things were happening elsewhere?
Well, Keir Starmer's a good point. Bear in mind, he was investigated first off. The police decided there was no further action needed for Beergate.
But what if the Mirror finds a video?
Well, and then he was investigated a second time after a number of complaints, especially by Tory MPs. So he did go through 2 investigations, and it may well be, in this case, the police would decide on a second investigation. But it is up to them, because they do cost a lot of money and take up a lot of manpower.
And moving on to Keir Starmer and his appointment of Sue Gray. Now, it seems as though she may well have broken Whitehall impartiality rules. Does that change things for Keir Starmer? Does that... He says he's a stickler for the rules. He presents a whiter-than-white image. But actually, this is all looking deeply fishy, and I felt a little bit gaslit at the time, being told that no, nothing to see here, nothing to see here, when a top Mandarin who is in charge of a report into Boris Johnson and his partying is then hired by Keir Starmer. It does look dodgy, Nigel. Yeah,
I think it does, because, I mean, she was very much sort of Miss Propriety in government. That was her job. Her job was to actually police ethics and so on. So it's not a good look that she may have broken the rules herself. Bear in mind, this is a leaked report. We haven't seen the final one. What she seems to have done wrong is to breach the ministerial the Civil Service Code. And what this says is civil servants mustn't be talking to the opposition unless they declare it. They must actually say they have a good reason for doing it. She apparently didn't do this, so that is a bad look. In that sense, she may have broken the rules. I don't quite see how Keir Starmer would have done. So it's not exactly the same comparison as with Partygate. It wasn't him breaking the rules, but yes, she might have done.
Well, he put her in a very difficult position then. If he was meeting with her, he must have known that was against Whitehall rules, against impartiality rules to be doing so. So he very much is implicated in this.
Well, we're having our own investigation now. It's like another Privileges inquiry.
I mean, how many investigations do we currently have going on about various parliamentary misconduct and civil service misconduct? How much money is this taking?
Well, bear in mind also, we're going to go through Partygate all over again with the COVID inquiry. So we haven't actually put it behind us. But certainly, I mean, whether or not he knew at the time that he was in breach of any rules, I'm not sure he could have known whether or not she had declared the meetings that she would have had. And as far as the criticism of her over the investigation into Partygate she did into Boris Johnson, of course, that happened long before this took place.
I think very much that you could level hypocrisy, the accusation of hypocrisy on Keir Starmer with all this. He does present himself as being different from the Conservatives. No sleaze here, no mispropriety here, no bad behaviour, but actually, I think a lot of us think all as bad as each other. But someone's just written into me, Ray in Chigwell. He says, I do not know anyone who did not break the rules from a mental health perspective. Although we tried, we all stepped over the line. Just look at Bernard Jenkins for a start. Let's move on and go forward for all our sakes, except Jenkins, because he's a hypocrite. He needs punishment. Bernard Jenkins, of course, sits on that privileges committee that has ruled well, not in Boris Johnson's favour one bit. So is there an accusation there? Should he have recused himself from being on that committee?
Yeah, actually, I think he should. I mean, if he was aware at the time that he had broken the rules, then while that investigation was going on, he should have recused himself. I mean, all I would say about the whole privileges report is there's an awful lot of sort of displacement activity going on, where people are especially Boris Johnson and his cheerleaders, trying to pick out these various things. Bernard Jenkins rule breaking. There's also the argument over Harriet Harman, whether she should have recused herself or making statements against Boris Johnson beforehand. So there's a lot of that happening. The police could, of course, investigate Bernard Jenkins if they chose to.
Goodness me, I am not sure there is an appetite for that, but please do let me know at home if you disagree. If you want to see all these people banged to right, investigated, and various inquiries to go on to see if anyone did anything in the least bit wrong. But I now have my panel with me to see what they make of these stories. Joining me is former Labour MP Stephen Pound, and we also have political commentator Claire Pearsall. With me, we will keep Nigel with us as well for his astute analysis. So, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon.
What a beautiful afternoon to join you.
It is a beautiful afternoon.
Any minute now, the thunder will be rolling in and the lightning will be crashing down, and it'll be a perfect metaphor for British politics.
That is beautiful. Did you rehearse that before you stepped in?
No, I did not.
It just rolls off the tongue for you, doesn't it,
me.
Stephen? Beautiful way with words. But I must be truthful, honest with the audience and say we are actually in a basement, so we cannot see what's happening outside, but Stephen insists it is a beautiful day. I wouldn't know. But anyway.
Take it from me, it's turned out nice again.
Not a great day for all of these people who have been pictured at this party. Bombshell footage is what the Sunday Mirror calls it. Stephen, is this bombshell footage?
Well, it's horrible at so many levels. I mean, like you, I sense a feeling of I just wish this would go away. When you see somebody in a Giles Brandreth sweater jiving like it's 1959 and bumping into a trestle table laden with stodgy gatto and warm white wine, you think to yourself, gosh, why can't I be a Conservative? It looks like quite good fun. But no, in reality, it's toe-curling, tooth-grindingly, butt-clenchingly, embarrassingly awful. And it really underlines this whole business about one rule for them, one rule for us. And I'm sorry, I think poor Rishi... I weep for Rishi.
Butt-clenchingly, embarrassingly awful. OK, that's what Stephen has to say. Claire?
Well, I think that we knew these parties had gone on. We'd seen photographs that had been put out there. I'm not sure I can follow quite the statement of Stephen just now. That was quite something. But it's just not a good look. And you do have to wonder why this video has come out now. Why have they taken all of that time when the still photographs were released last year? So it just adds to the woes of Rishi Sunak. Parties aren't going away. COVID isn't going away. And the sweater, I have to say, was on sale in the House of Commons shop.
Oh, no.
It had portcullises and Big Bens and all sorts on it. So there's a special place for that Christmas jumper.
I think the general public are very divided over this. I think a lot of people look at what's going on when it comes to the economy, housing, migration, etc., and think, oh, for goodness sake, do we still need to be banging on about bombshell footage about parties that took place 2-3 years ago?
Well, it is still raw in many cases. There's a good friend of mine who's a DUP MP in Strangford, a man called Jim Shannon. And in the middle of all this business, Jim Shannon's mother-in-law, to whom he was devoted, died, and he was unable to attend the funeral, was unable to see her before she died. And for a lot of people like Jim, and there's plenty of people out there like that, this is still very, very raw. It hurts. I mean, I hope it goes away, and I hope it goes away because there's an expression of contrition from these people who say, look, we got it wrong.
Now, I'm going to get your thoughts later on in the show about Keir Starmer and the appointment of Sue Gray and
Well, I
what
must
we've
be off.
learned today about that. But yes, because you turned up a little bit late, that's all we've got time for now. We'll see you back in just one moment, Claire Pearsall as well as Stephen Pound, of course. You are watching and listening to GB News Sunday with me, Emily Carver. We've got lots more coming up on today's show with the shocking news that prolific serial killer Levi Belfield has won his bid to marry in prison.
Disgusting.
It is disgusting. I'll be asking, should prisoners be allowed to tie the knot? I do not think so, but what do you think? All of that after these short messages.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Sunday with me, Emily Carver, on your TV, online and digital radio. You've been getting in touch on our big topic of the day, Partygate. Peter says millions caught COVID-19. Did they all keep to the rules? The Prime Minister and his aides are working and living in Number 10, trying desperately to run the country with all its complexities. So these stupid rules for Number 10 are just that, stupid. Yes, but is there double standards at play here? Wendy says, fundamentally, all these gatherings are a reflection that those in positions of power and influence did not truly believe in lockdown. I agree with you there. Why then run a counter-information unit on those who tried to stop the madness? And John has to say, who cares about Partygate? It's all a big distraction. Get on with fixing this country. And yes, there is a lot to fix. I agree with you, to be honest, John. It may be an unpopular opinion, but I think I'm sick and tired of hearing about Partygate and all of this navel-gazing and all of these investigations. But please do keep your views coming in. I know many of you feel very differently. Subscribe to our YouTube channel while you're at it. Follow us on Twitter. We're at GB News. I'm at Carver Emily. Now, moving on to something that is absolutely disgusting, in my view, reprehensible and should not be allowed. Prolific serial killer Levi Belfield is going to be allowed to get married in prison as it stands. Belfield is serving 2 whole life orders for killing 13-year-old Millie Dowler, Marsha McDonnell and Amelie Delagrange. He is the only man in Britain to ever be given 2 whole life orders. It's also reported he's won a bid to be given £30,000 in legal aid to challenge the initial decision to block his marriage. He couldn't make it up. Should prisoners be allowed to marry? Or is this another example of our softness when it comes to crime and serial killers? Joining me now is Nadia Essex, dating coach, and Peter Blexley, former Met detective. Nadia, are you going to defend this serial killer's right to marry?
Well, I mean, look, it's a very, very difficult subject, obviously, because, you know, it's very emotive and there's lots of different aspects at play here. And really, more than anything, you know, if he's legally allowed to, then he's legally allowed to, and whoever makes the laws, if that needs to be changed, then that needs to be changed. But I just worry more for the welfare of the woman, because, you know, I wonder how sort of mentally stable she is, that she thinks that this is an appropriate thing to do. And I think that it should be, you know, as long as things have to be well fed all the way down the line, and to make sure that her welfare is the number one priority, to make sure that she's not being manipulated, she's not being, you know, abused in terms of emotional abuse to suck her in. And yeah, it's very, very tough, because ultimately that particular case, you'd think no, but in general, when people are in prison, if they fall in love, then in theory, you know, you'd think to yourself,
Nadia, just on
maybe.
But I mean,
he's obviously a child killer, it's very different.
You're a dating expert. What type of woman wants to marry a serial killer who is banged up? Because this is a thing that we see in society. I've watched documentaries on it over in the States, usually. People, you know, being attracted to men who are incarcerated.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not even, people think, oh, it's, you know, vulnerable women or women that, you know, I don't know, need their heads checked or whatever, but it can happen. I mean, you know, we've got, in this country, Lauren Goodyear fell in love with the guy that she fell in love with, and he was in prison. And it just starts off with, you know, writing or on the phone, and you can fall in love with someone that way. So it's not necessarily vulnerable women all the time, but we just have to make sure if they're going to get married, then there's got to be massive welfare.
Very odd indeed. Peter, I mean, this is just ludicrous, isn't it, really, that a serial killer could possibly be allowed to marry while they're serving whole life sentences, multiple whole life sentences. The law needs to change here. Do serial killers deserve their human rights?
With rights come responsibilities. And there is a responsibility upon us all not to prowl the streets and murder brilliant young women and defenceless children. And that's what this monster did. And I'm also going to mention the utterly heroic Kate Sheedy, who Belfield also tried to kill, but fortunately failed. And despite her injuries and the trauma, she got up in the witness box at the Old Bailey and courageously gave so much evidence, which went a long way to ensuring that Belfield will never taste freedom again. I call upon Alex Chalk MP, the Lord Chancellor, or any other sitting MP to put before the Commons tomorrow a one-line bill which reads simply: people serving life sentences should not be allowed to marry whilst in jail. That's it. A one-line law. Get everybody behind it in the Commons, get it through before the summer recess, and get it on the statute book.
I mean, Peter, I think that would probably be the most popular bill ever put before Parliament, I imagine. I think people reading and reminding themselves of this man's heinous crimes will completely agree with you. But just on the general point about prisoners and their human rights, do you think that we are too soft when it comes to inmates? Do you think that they have too many human rights, or is this really important for us to be a fine society, essentially? Do we need to give prisoners their human rights in order to uphold that?
In the majority of cases, Punishment without rehabilitation is a complete and utter waste of time. But Belfield will die in prison. He cannot be rehabilitated. He is beyond the pale. He is subhuman. He is a monster. He lost any rights whatsoever when he prowled the streets, murdering young women and children on multiple occasions. He's a monster. I have absolutely no concerns about his rights. But of course, other prisoners serving lesser sentences very much do need to be rehabilitated. So when the day that they are released does come around, they can re-enter society and become contributing members of the public.
That sounds a lot like common sense, Peter. Thank you very much indeed. Sorry, that's all we've got time for. A little bit squeezed there. Nadia Essex, dating coach, and Peter Blexley, former Met detective. Thank you very much indeed. Now, I believe we have some breaking news. Nicola Sturgeon has returned to her home for the first time since her arrest last Sunday. It was last Sunday that we reported that she had in fact been arrested. She was released without charge. She's told reporters that she is certain she has done nothing wrong and that she intends to be back in Parliament early this week and will make herself available for questions then. Very interesting indeed. We'll follow up on that. You are watching and listening to GB News Sunday with me, Emily Carver. We've got lots more coming up on today's show, with the former Prime Minister facing a crunch vote tomorrow on that Privileges Committee recommendation and a watchdog finding him in violation of parliamentary standards again for his new Daily Mail column. Is this the end of the line for Bojo? But first, let's get the news with Aaron.
Hi there, it is 1:31. Aaron Armstrong here with you in the GB newsroom. Well, as you've just heard, Nicola Sturgeon says she's done nothing wrong in her relation to her arrest over SNP finances. The former First Minister spoke as she returned home for the first time since being arrested and released without charge last Sunday. Ms Sturgeon refused to answer any questions, but will do so when she returns to Holyrood early next week. The Levelling Up Secretary, Michael Gove, has apologised for what he's described as unacceptable behaviour at a Conservative staff party during lockdown, saying he's personally sorry. In the video, obtained by The Mirror, partygoers can be heard joking about bending the rules, while others dance in front of tables of food and drink. At least 24 people attended the Christmas party in 2020 at Tory party headquarters during the height of the pandemic, when indoor socialising was banned. Two of those in that party were named in Boris Johnson's resignations honours list. More than 10,000 people have been detected crossing the English Channel in small boats so far this year. Home Office figures have confirmed crossings have increased in recent days as the weather's improved, with more than 2,500 making the journey in the past week. However, the total number of crossings this year remains below the equivalent number at this point last year. And the UK has pledged an extra £16 million to boost Ukraine's cyber defences. That's in addition to £6.35 million promised last year. The government says it's to help Ukraine defend itself better against critical infrastructure attacks from Russia. The Prime Minister will use a summit this week to call on investors and businesses to step up their support for the country's economic recovery. And it all comes amid reports of fresh gains by Ukraine in the Zaporizhzhia region in their counter-offensive against Russia. More on all those stories on our website, gbnews.com.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions, and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio, and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Welcome back to GB News Sunday with me, Emily Carver. We have migrated to the comfortable, more comfortable sofas here in the studio. And you've been getting in touch thick and fast, really, about Belfield, Levi Belfield, serial killer who won his battle to marry his girlfriend in prison, which is absolutely disgusting in my view. Stephen, you wanted to get something in. You wanted to say something on
Here's
this.
a key thing. This is a very crafty, litigious man. I mean, I remember him when he used to be a wheel clamper in Hounslow. It's very close to home for me. If he marries this woman, he will then demand conjugal rights. Because if, under the Marriage Act, if a marriage isn't consummated, it can be dissolved. So he will then say, and this is a man, don't forget, who's tried to cite the European Court on Human Rights on not wearing an engagement ring. He will then say, I must have conjugal rights. And then we are in an area that is so deep, dark and disgusting that I think Blakely's law needs to come in, not just for people serving whole life sentences, but anybody in prison. If you're only in prison for a short stretch, wait till you get out. Nobody in prison should be able to marry.
Claire, I think most people would agree that serial killers should not have conjugal rights.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he took the lives of 3 young women, at least 3 young women, who will never get the opportunity to marry and go on and live their lives. So absolutely disgusting that he should be allowed to do so from prison.
Well, Barb says, wonder how the victims' families feel. Bring back capital punishment for these monsters who carry out these heinous crimes. I think a lot of you in my inbox today would like to see well, capital punishment for these types of crimes. But that's a debate for another time. Welcome back to GB News Sunday. We're going to be moving on to the civil war over the Partygate scandal, which shows no signs of abating after Johnson branded the findings deranged. That sparked a row amongst Tory MPs about whether or not to vote for the report on Monday. Tomorrow, the committee, however, hit back, describing Johnson's conduct as disingenuous to the point of being deliberately misleading and recommending he to be stripped of the pass afforded to former MPs. That would have granted him access to the parliamentary estate. The affair hasn't ruined Mr Johnson's revenue streams, however. On Friday, he announced his new column at the Daily Mail. Let's have a look.
Is going to be exactly what I think. Hi folks, Boris Johnson here. I am thrilled to be asked to contribute a column to the Daily Mail. It is going to be completely unexpurgated stuff. I may even have to cover politics, but I'll obviously try to do that as little as possible, unless I absolutely have to. I'm much looking forward to making my first contribution to those illustrious pages on Saturday. Join me in the Daily Mail on Saturday.
I don't know about you, but I thought he might use his first column in the Daily Mail to give us some juicy details on what's been going on with the investigation against him and his relationship with Rishi Sunak. No, we got a lot of words about a weight loss jab which didn't work for him. But there you go. Joining me now is Peter Edwards, former editor of Labour List, and Dr Rakib Hassan, social policy analyst. Thank you very much to you both for joining me this afternoon on GB News Sunday. Rakib, I'll go to you first. Boris Johnson, does he have a way forward? Is he finished?
Well, I mean, if there's one person, or rather one politician, who would be able to re-emerge from the ashes, who looks like he's in the doldrums and then makes some sort of stunning recovery, it would be Boris Johnson. But saying that, I think that this entire Partygate controversy has been deeply damaging for his reputation. His Brexit Boris brand has taken a real hit. If you see recent polling, if voters who are still generally supportive of their own decision to vote to leave the European Union and are still very much pro-Brexit in their political appetites, they don't see Boris Johnson as a particularly trustworthy or competent figure. So I think when you see those polling figures and the damage he's done to his own personal political capital, I do think it'd be very difficult for Boris Johnson to make a recovery as an individual politician now.
Peter, do you share that view? Or do you think there could be a comeback? Who knows?
Boris clearly wants to come back. He'll never be Prime Minister again, and he'll probably never be leader again of the Tory party. I think the air is going out of his balloon very quickly. As some of your other coverage of today's headline shows, it's a mixture of controversy amongst the Tory party, lies in several areas of his life and career, including to the House of Commons, then all the other activities that he does to keep going his celebrity status, which will help him financially, and everyone's entitled to earn a living, but they won't help him achieve what he wants to do, which is to be a credible candidate either as leader of the opposition or to be Prime Minister. So I think the air is going out of his balloon. And bear in mind that, you know, there has to be a leadership contest for Boris to try and have this comeback. He doesn't want to be Shadow Chancellor or a more junior minister. But bear in mind, there have been around, I think, 3 leadership attempts. He won one. The other 2, when Rishi Sunak and Theresa May won, he didn't even make it to the starting line. And that's because, as we've seen again this week, he's a quitter, not a fighter.
Rakib, there's interesting polling out today in the Sunday Times, I don't know if you've seen it, that shows that Rishi Sunak is now 20 points ahead of Boris Johnson when it comes to popularity in the Red Wall. The Red Wall seemed to support among the Red Wall seats, if you can generalise, seems to be waning when it comes to Boris Johnson, who was the superstar who, of course, gave the Tory party an 80-seat majority not that long ago.
No, absolutely. And there was this talk of Boris Johnson being the Heineken Tory. He was able to appeal to voter groups that many traditional Tories are not able to do so in the past. But that was the point I was making earlier, that in the so-called Red Wall, many of those post-industrial, pro-Leave constituencies, his brand has taken a real hit. Because what those voters want, just like in any other part of the country, they're ultimately focused on political competence and policy delivery. And perhaps many of them may well have reached the view that Boris Johnson is draining a great deal of time and energy out of our politics, which is not particularly helpful in the middle of a cost of living crisis that many left behind areas in the so-called Red Wall are particularly vulnerable to.
Peter, just very lastly, I think a lot of the public are sick of hearing about Boris Johnson. You see the opposition going on endlessly about Boris Johnson this, Boris Johnson did that. Are we at risk of simply are you looking like a bully at the moment, really? You know, he's been beaten and beaten and beaten and beaten down. Is it time to just leave him alone? He's not the Prime Minister anymore. He's not even an MP.
Well, there's 2 reasons I disagree with that. One is Boris continues to search for the limelight, and Boris continues to break the rules. And we've seen that with the Daily Mail column this week, for which I'd imagine he's paid a fairly handsome sum. And the Commons group on business appointments gave an initial view that he'd broken the rules. The other reason why I don't think it comes anywhere near close to bullying is because Boris's own behaviour. You know, think about what he's said about other groups in the past, insulting the people of Merseyside, comparing Muslim women to letterboxes and so on and so on. Boris is not a shrinking violet. He's been very blunt about other people, often extremely offensive. He cannot complain about newspapers simply writing things up factually.
Well, I'll let the viewers decide. Thank you very much indeed, Peter Edwards, former editor of Labour List, and Dr. Rakib Ehsan, social policy analyst. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Now we're going to throw back to my wonderful panel. Stephen, you know, when Phil Schofield was getting a lot of heat over his scandal, Philip Schofield, ITV's This Morning, we spoke about, oh, maybe we should be thinking about his mental health. Boris Johnson, he's being beaten over the head with a stick every single day, constantly in the papers. He's gorging himself in his fridge, probably emotionally eating from all this. We seem to see him as this Teflon man that you can just continue to knock down. Are we at risk of bullying too much, or am I talking absolute nonsense?
Well, I don't know. I mean, he's obviously, the soundtrack to his life is Chumbawamba, isn't it? You know, I get knocked down, but I get up again. You can listen. But look, I have to say...
But can any man sustain this level of scrutiny, bombardment?
Well, I don't know, but look, I read the Mail on Sunday for Andrew Pierce. It's worth reading for that. But I have to say, I was disappointed when I exactly like you, I wanted to hear the inside scoop on where he is. And Rishi Sunak's increasingly unpleasant comments about he's just an ex-MP. Instead of which, I'm reading about chorizo and cheese. And I mean, chorizo's about as foreign as quinoa to me. I mean, I have a Greg's loyalty card. I don't know about these things. But, I didn't want to read it.
Not very sophisticated, Stephen.
No, I'm from West London. I'm sorry, but I was disappointed. But the question is, you just game it in your head. How could he come back?
Yeah.
And I don't see a scenario.
Well, Claire, Anthony's written in from Yorkshire. He says Boris's only future is as a commentator because as a politician, he went woke, he allowed mass illegal immigration, he abandoned Northern Ireland and adopted net zero. Not for me. The Tories are finished for a generation. I can't help but agree with that.
To be honest, I agree with that. And I think a lot of the problems is Boris Johnson goes out there and said, everybody's being wrong, everybody's damning me, I haven't done anything wrong. But when you start to peel back, let's remove Partygate, just put that to one side. But you look at the net zero agenda, which is something he pushed, which I think is wrong. And it is costing people thousands and thousands of pounds that they just can't afford at the moment. But it's all of the rest of his policy decisions. He's a superb communicator, but a really, really bad administrator. And he comes up with these grand ideas, no detail behind it, no way of looking at how you actually put these things through. And I think that the shine has come off and people are realising that what he is a spokesperson, a very good one, but not a great politician.
I think that's a good way of putting it. The shine has come off, and he's fulfilled what we needed from him. But we've got some breaking news now on the lockdown party video of Conservative Party staffers appearing to celebrate in December 2020. The Met Police have now issued a statement saying they are aware of the footage and are considering it.
Oh, well, that's reassuring, isn't it?
Yes. OK, good.
I'm sorry, if you look at the rest of that report, you actually referenced the Sunday Times analysis today, and there's a very interesting thing there, perhaps a bit lower down inside it, to say that he is desperately unpopular amongst the red wall seats. But guess where? He's incredibly popular with the Conservative Party. Now, the Conservative Party is a small group of politically motivated men and women, mostly of my age.
Hang on, who are you talking about? Boris Johnson or Rishi Sunak?
Boris Johnson.
Yes.
And Boris Johnson is still very popular. And they have the power, to select and deselect people. So I think that's going to be very, very... But, sorry.
May I just say, just on this breaking news of the Met Police are aware of the party video, they are going to be, in quotes, considering it. The Met Police have been under huge amounts of heat for not dealing with basic crimes in London. If you get your car nicked, you're very, very unlikely to get anything apart from a number from the police to then send to your insurers. If someone breaks into your house, you're very unlikely to have a police officer even come round, let alone find the culprit. Is this really what we want the police to be spending their time on? And our taxpayers' money?
No, I don't think it is. And I think you're right. The Metropolitan Police have an awful lot of responsibilities that they're not following up. You look at the rape cases, burglaries, car theft, antisocial behaviour, and just in London alone, that they don't have the resources to go after that. So to go after a group of people, yes, it's wrong, but also it opens up a wider question. If they're going to re-look at the CCHQ, Conservative Party, what about Keir Starmer's party, which we've saw photographs from, and I'm pretty sure there'll be some footage from that. Are police forces now going to have to go back?
You're referring to the Beer and Korma Gate?
Beer and Korma Gate. Are we going to go back over it?
Well,
it might not be to you.
Well, hang on.
But is this a party? Because
was the cake that Boris Johnson was ambushed with, was that a party?
If you're going to investigate one, I think you have to then start investigating.
Investigated. That innocent bottle of beer up in
right.
Northampton.
Well, hang on. Are the Sunday Mirror going to find a video from that event that then means the police need to investigate? Or could this be a little bit politically motivated by the Mirror?
Too serious for that sort of thing. You know, we don't go around in those flashy Christmas jumpers jiving. We don't, you know, we're good.
Well, so because socialists can't have fun. There you go. Heard it first from Stephen Pound. They're just too boring and too pious, perhaps.
Yeah.
Too on the high ground to have fun. Thank you very much indeed for that. Now, we are going to be moving on, I believe, to a very, very different story. But just to reiterate that breaking news, Met Police are aware of the party video.
What does that
and
mean?
They will be considering it. Yes, I'm not really sure what that means. If we get more information, we will give it to you. Does it mean an investigation? Not sure. Anyway, the legendary musical theatre composer Andrew Lloyd Webber has hit out at fears over cultural appropriation and wokeness after he was warned against an idea for a musical because he wasn't from that country. The theatre composer said, if applied widely, this means some of his biggest hits, such as Evita, wouldn't be made today, as he remarked he was advised to stick to safe subjects like Pride and Prejudice. So is the much-vaulted death of art upon us? Has the woke mob managed to resurrect Puritanism? Well, I think this is a very good one to discuss, because we have seen many people come out and say, we would never be able to produce this piece of art. We'd never be able to produce this play, Claire. We'd never be able to produce this magnificent piece of writing now because it's not politically correct. And now, apparently, you need to be from the country where the play is set in order to be able to write it.
It means we are never going to have beautiful theatre, art or writing in this country. We have enough subjects of our own in this country, and that's fair and good. But things like Evita, I always remember listening to the original soundtrack, and I was so obsessed with it that I went on to read about Eva Perón, what was happening over in South America, and my love of politics was really born from something like that. I'd never heard about it particularly before. It wasn't taught in my history classes at school. And I wanted to learn more. Now, surely that's what art is about. Theatre is about taking you out of your normal comforts and surroundings and reading you a story, taking you through something.
Too much common sense, Claire, for a Sunday afternoon. Too much common sense. But that's what you would think. Stephen, do you sometimes find yourself a little alienated from some people on the left who seem to like to go overboard when it comes to this? Accusations of cultural appropriation. What does that mean? Surely that's sharing and caring to take on different things from around the world.
Well, I don't know. My wife was being upbraided the other day for wearing a shalwa kameez at a sort of one of our exciting social occasions that we in the Labour Party rather enjoy. And she was accused of culturally appropriating, to which one of my Asian colleagues who was wearing a suit and tie said, what does that make me? Because there he was wearing Western dress. But look...
well, there you go. That's breaking news, if ever I heard some.
Yeah, well, if you think about it, you know, the greatest playwrights in this country, I mean, Christopher Marlowe and that chap Shakespeare, I mean, you know, when they were writing plays...
That chap Shakespeare.
Well, they were writing plays in which women couldn't appear on stage, so women were played by boys. You know, so, you know, how on earth do you actually talk about that when you consider the plays written in that sense? Then Laurence Olivier played Othello. I remember that. He'd blacked up for it. You know, but he was a magnificent actor. Surely the clue here is in the word acting. And when Mr. Sheen, who's a brilliant actor, says that only Welsh people can play Welsh parts, I'm sorry, the essence of acting is that
I don't think we want actors blacking up on stage. I think
say,
that would be
a
few steps too far.
This was 1958.
That was in 1958, a very different time indeed. Yeah. And I, of course, was not born.
Well, no,
so I can't speak to that time. But Claire, I mean, we see this so much. I'm trying to think of the different people who've come out. Ricky Gervais, of course, has spoken up about the woke madness. We've seen very many comedians who appear on this channel who found it difficult to get gigs because you have to sort of toe one line, not a party line, but a sort of airy-fairy, middle of the road, let's not upset anyone unless it's about Trump.
But I think the arts are there to challenge you. Comedy is there to be enjoyed. Now, there are some comedians that I don't particularly like. Doesn't mean I want them cancelled. It just means I won't listen to them. I won't buy tickets to go and see them. I won't listen to what they've got to say. But I don't think they should be banned for it. And I really feel that challenging opinion is important, debate is important. You can debate a subject that a comedian has raised. And we've seen it all through the past. Ricky Gervais has come under fire, but then has produced some incredibly moving pieces of script that has gone on to be a sort of national treasure. And it's the same with Jim Davidson of this channel. He often will be referred to as anti-woke and rude and abusive. But I think there's an important... You can understand that you have a conversation with somebody.
Because even the lovies are getting annoyed at this, aren't they, Stephen?
You need to have that conversation.
Jo Brandt, she hit out at censoring comedy. She said lots of things upset people. Nothing's illegal. She hit out at comedians having to censor their jokes. And, you know, acts to avoid upsetting people. It's just too much, isn't it?
Yeah. I think it's interesting, people like Jo Brandt. I mean, Jo Brandt's, you know, extremely interesting. You know, she was a mental health nurse for a long time. She speaks a position of some authority as well as a comedian. I think she realises that we're backing into a cul-de-sac here, and that's the real problem. This way...
I'm going to have to stop you in your cul-de-sac there.
Because
we have some more breaking news. We have some more breaking news, so let's bring you that. And this time it's regarding Nicola Sturgeon and the ongoing investigation into the SNP's party finances. The former First Minister is certain she has done nothing wrong. That's what she says. She also told reporters she accepts she is a public figure, but she is also a human being that is entitled to a bit of privacy, as are her neighbours. I would love to get the views of my panel on that, but we must go to... You are watching and listening to GB News Sunday with me, Emily Carver. Coming up in the next hour, the government's migrant housing plan doesn't seem to be going to plan. Rishi Sunak would like, as it seems the scheme is inadvertently leading to a bigger backlog of newer claims, believe it or not. So that backlog is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And a big box boss of Wix has said shoppers with transcritical views are bigots and they're not welcome in their stores. Some are in uproar over his comments. Will Wix be the latest brand to go woke and go broke? And it seems any dreams of a Montecito media empire have fallen flat for the Sussexes as Spotify are parting ways with Meghan and Harry. Big cheers for that, with a top executive calling them grifters. All of that after this.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant, the big green, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience.
Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Fridays from 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome to GB News Sunday. I'm Emily Carver. For the next hour, I will be keeping you company on TV, online and digital radio. So coming up, Sue Gray has broken impartiality rules over her advisory job to Keir Starmer. A damning inquiry has found the senior civil servant breached regulations and could have been sacked if she had not already quit. Then the DIY giant Wix is facing a boycott of its stores and a falling share price after its chief operating officer said shoppers with trans-critical views are bigots and are not welcome in their stores. Go figure. And a major report says government efforts to clear the asylum backlog aren't working, and their attempts have actually made the situation worse, believe it or not. That deals a major blow to Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's key pledge to end the crossings. But first, before all of that, let's get the news headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Good afternoon to you. It's 2 o'clock. Aaron Armstrong here in the GB newsroom. The Met Police says it's aware of and is considering a newly emerged video showing Conservative staff dancing and joking about COVID restrictions during the height of the pandemic. The Levelling Up Secretary has apologised for what he's described as unacceptable behaviour in December 2020 when indoor socialising was banned. Michael Gove says he's personally sorry, but the Liberal Democrats say his apology is too little too late. 2 of the 24 people at the Christmas party were named in Boris Johnson's resignation honours list. Mr Gove told us disciplinary action's already been taken.
The reason why those steps were taken was to reduce the spread of the disease in order to make sure that the pressures on the NHS were manageable, in order to make sure that we could treat people who were very ill. So, again, the actions here are deeply distressing, and I can only apologise to people that individuals behaved in this way. My understanding is that there was an investigation into the party when the photograph emerged, and people were disciplined.
Meanwhile, MPs will tomorrow debate any possible punishment for Boris Johnson after he was found to have misled Parliament over Partygate. The Privileges Committee recommended the former Prime Minister should face a 90-day suspension had he not already resigned in advance of the report. It's understood his supporters are being encouraged to abstain, but former Brexit Secretary David Davis told Camilla Tominey he will support the committee, saying its findings are clear.
One of the things about Parliament is it's the highest court in the land.
Yeah.
That creates a problem when you're coming to privileges. What's that problem? It's like having a trial in a village. Everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
Nobody is entirely unbiased.
How do they know his own mind at the time?
They don't have to. They don't, what they know is what he knows.
Yeah.
If you go to a party, you know it was a party. You don't need an advisor to tell you.
Well, Nicola Sturgeon says she's done nothing wrong in relation to her arrest over SNP finances. The former First Minister spoke as she returned home for the first time since being arrested and released without charge last Sunday. Ms Sturgeon refused to answer any questions, but says she will when she returns to Holyrood early next week. Rishi Sunak's facing a 4th by-election following the resignation of a former Conservative MP. David Warburton, who had the Tory whip suspended last April, has stepped down from his Somerton and Frome seat following accusations of sexual misconduct and cocaine use. He's the 4th Conservative MP in 8 days to resign, following announcements by Boris Johnson, Nigel Adams and Nadine Dorries. The number of migrants entering the UK via the English Channel in small boats this year has surpassed 10,000. According to the Home Office figures, 374 people were detected making the journey yesterday alone. Well, crossings have increased recently as the weather's improved, but the number this year is still below the equivalent at this point last year. Almost 46,000 migrants crossed the Channel in 2022. The UK has pledged an extra £16 million to boost Ukraine's cyber defences. That's in addition to £6.35 million promised last year. The government says it will better help Ukraine defend its critical infrastructure from Russian attacks. The Prime Minister will use a summit this week to call on investors and businesses to step up their support for Ukraine's economic recovery. It comes as the counteroffensive against Russian forces continues in the south and the east of the country. Thunder, lightning and heavy rain are moving across the UK. It's leading to concerns of flash flooding. The Met Office is predicting wind and hail with yellow warnings for thunderstorms across the majority of England, Wales and Northern Ireland. The warnings will remain in place until midnight. It could lead to a month's worth of rain falling in a few hours. That is as a result of the recent warm weather, which is set to continue today, regardless, with temperatures in the mid to high 20s. And Prince William's vowed to tackle homelessness by building social housing on some of his own land. The Prince of Wales told The Times ending the plight of hidden homelessness in the UK has been a lifelong ambition. He has expressed frustration at government, councils and charities who he says are managing homelessness rather than preventing it. Many of the details of the 5-year plan will be announced next month. And this is GB News. More as it happens throughout the afternoon. But now it is back to GB News Sunday.
Yes, so the saga of Partygate is not going away at all, is it? A video, well, the Sunday Mirror calls it a bombshell video, has emerged of Conservative Party staff dancing, drinking, joking about breaking the rules back in 2020. That was when the COVID restrictions were in place. Let's take a quick look.
It's for party. It's also an ad and also Instagram Live. As long as we don't stream well, I'm pretty sure impressive, I'm gonna say. Take that back. Laura? What do you think of this? Laura?
There you go, having a little bit too much fun, while the rest of us were being, locked down in our homes. The Metropolitan Police said a short time ago, this is breaking news, that they are aware of the video which appears to show a Tory lockdown party. Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer has woken up to some bad news as an official inquiry has found that the civil servant that he poached after the party inquiry, Sue Gray, did in fact breach Whitehall impartiality rules by taking up the job as Chief of Staff in Starmer's office. I thought it at the time. It's nice to see that we have that now in the papers today. Now, the findings are likely to be highly embarrassing for the Labour leader. He's railed repeatedly against Tory misconduct, hasn't he? So joining me to bring us the very latest on all of this political news is senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Nigel, thank you very much. Bombshell video. The police are now considering it.
Yes, considering. I wonder what that word considering means. It sort of sounds like a sigh of frustration, like sort of, do we really have to look at this one again? But I'm sure the police will do their duty, and they will look at it again. I mean, the question really comes down to this party happened in December 2020. They investigated at the time, and it was based on a picture of the group of people who were there.
Yes, it was a group shot, wasn't it, at the time? Of all of them smiling.
That's right, that's right. And in that particular one, that the London mayoral candidate, Sean Bailey, was in the picture. He isn't in this video, that he'd left the party before that video was taken. But yes, I'm sure they will look at it again. And the question is, does it provide more evidence that they didn't see first time round? And secondly, is it in the public interest to have a long and expensive investigation all over again?
Well, you're no fan of the Conservatives, are you? I think it's fair to say, Nigel. Do you think an investigation is in the public interest?
Yes, I do. If they could actually establish an offence was committed they couldn't find first time round, I think they probably have to do it.
Because I think it's absolutely ridiculous.
But the question really is whether they consider that evidence hugely different from what they saw first time round. So it's not in the public interest in the sense that to actually come to the same conclusion again and spend a lot of money on it. If they see actually, well, hang on a sec, there are 2, 3, 4, 5 people there who we ought to have found and we didn't, that's a different matter.
Now, a lot of people seem to be divided about this at home because, on the one hand, people are writing to me saying this is clear double standards, but also that it proves the government didn't believe in their own rules, or at least these people revelling in having this Christmas bash clearly didn't believe that this virus was going to kill them, make them drop dead.
No, I mean, I think that
That's startling, though.
Yes, but that in a sense is a separate debate, isn't it? That whether or not the rules should have been enforced, and these particular ones at the time, you could meet other people outdoors, you couldn't meet them indoors, which was the alleged offence they committed at the time. So I think that matter really now is genuinely for the COVID inquiry to decide whether those rules were necessary at the time.
Well, thank you very much, Nigel. Lots of you have been getting in touch on this very topic. Stuart has to say they should all be sacked immediately and ousted from our government. What a kick in the teeth by our leaders. Do as we say, not as we do. Double standards to the highest degree. There you go, strong stuff. Laura says everyone stepped over the mark at some point. Where is the outrage over Starmer's breaches of the rules he himself supported? Claire Pearsall also mentioned that earlier. And luckily enough, she is here back with me in the studio, and so is Stephen Pound. Thank you very much for staying around this hour. So we do have a division in the inbox on this. Some people think, oh, for goodness sake, Partygate, over and done with. Do we need to be spending police resources on looking into these things again from now years ago, actually, Claire? But then others are sick of what they see as double standards.
Well, I think it's quite interesting that we don't know what the word considered means. So the police are aware of it, then they're considering it. Is that the same as me considering going to the gym tomorrow, knowing full well it isn't going to happen? I just wonder if the police are now in such a really tough position that they have to put out some kind of statement which really says nothing to appease people. I think that we now need to not continue down this route. I do think it is an enormous waste of resources. Those people, some of whom were already fined, I believe there were up to 3 people were already fined for their part in that party. I'm not sure what else we will get out from it by investigating. What are we going to do to these people? I just don't understand what there is now that we can gain from this.
I mean, these young people who are pictured in this footage, Stephen, well, they must be absolutely distraught that this
Well,
is
I hope so. I mean, they deserve to be
They must be.
distraught.
Do you think they deserve to be?
I think absolutely right. They were part of the machine that was making the rules that we had to abide by.
Surely it's the leadership who created that environment that allowed these 20-odd-year-olds to be doing this.
Just following orders isn't actually a very, very good defence here. But look, I mean, when I heard about this bombshell video, I thought it was going to be John Belushi rides again at Animal House or something like that. Instead of which a bit of jiving by the trestle table. It's pretty pathetic, by and large. But look, I admire the Swedes on this. Sweden have just completed their entire COVID inquiry, the whole thing on time, on budget, and they've actually said, that's it, we've done it now. We've investigated everything, no more discussion, let's move forward into the next century, let's actually build the country up. As far as I'm concerned, Sweden have got it right and we've got it wrong. Let's move on.
We do labour over these things, don't we, Claire? But also, how is this damaging... You're in touch with the grassroots of the Conservative movement of the party. How are people feeling about all this? Because, taking a knocking.
It is, and I think people are fed up now. It comes down to sort of 2 different factions. There are those who believe Boris to be the correct person to be running the country, and there are those who don't.
And he's a victim of a stitch-up and all of this.
So that divide is so alive and kicking within the grassroots party. But the one thing that connects everybody together is how let down they feel by the party as a whole. And when we consider that over 1,000 councillors lost their seat in the local elections and nothing has been said to them about, thank you for your service and we're very sorry, there's an awful lot of bad feeling building up. These are the very same people that you are going to rely upon to go out and help in by-elections, given that we have a number of them coming up at the moment, and again in the general election when that comes. And if they aren't willing to do so, I think the party's in real trouble.
Yes, I do think so, and I think it's been extremely difficult for people on the grassroots to be able to defend the government for many different reasons, not least because of all this COVID stuff. Stephen, I'm going to have to ask about your man, Keir Starmer, and his appointment of Sue Gray. looking very fishy, looking very dodgy. We now see that she broke impartiality rules, Whitehall impartiality rules. That's what we're seeing today. Do you not believe it?
Well, no, hang on a second. That's not the case. This is Darren Tierney. He's the chap who took over from her as the head of ethics. He's actually made an opinion, which is he's passed on Simon cases, and which is a confidential...
Isn't the Partygate inquiry opinion?
Well, no, hang on a second. This is a confidential internal document. There's no conclusion. There's not been any investigation. There's not been any actual decision taken. Sue Gray was an extraordinary, as Boris Johnson himself said, you know, she's actually remarkably skillful and professional civil servant. But look, you remember she took time off to go and run a pub in Dundalk, and you know, she's married to a great country and western singer in Ireland. She's not a conventional person. But at the moment, the idea that there's a conflict of interest because somebody was thinking about going to work for somebody else while she was working for the state, compared with what we've just seen...
I am sorry, she was in charge of the reporting to Boris Johnson, was she not? This does
endorsed by Boris Johnson.
I think, I'm not going to call this corruption, but do you not understand how people look at this and think, well, Whitehall is supposed to be impartial, and Sue Gray, who was top Mandarin, leading this report into Boris Johnson that contributed to his downfall as Prime Minister...
Well,
Is it right?
You know about the Widdicombe rules in civil service. Obviously, nobody expects the civil servants all to be eunuchs. Everybody knows that they're going to have political views. What you cannot do is to impose your political views on the work you're doing. And nobody has suggested for a second that Sue Gray's done that. Her son is a Labour activist. She appears to be sympathetic to the Labour Party. But under the Widdicombe rules, she could not have expressed that while she was a senior
this
civil
official
servant.
Cabinet Office inquiry has concluded that Miss Gray fell short of the requirements of both the Civil Service Code and her employment contract when she quietly took part in talks about joining Labour as Sir Keir's Chief of Staff. Claire, this is damaging for Keir Starmer.
It absolutely is. I think it brings into question his judgment. If you were Keir Starmer looking at a senior civil servant, which it would be a very, very good appointment, and Sue Gray is exemplary, and I'm quite scared of her, to be perfectly brutal. She was in charge of my career for some time. But it brings into question your judgment. Wouldn't you say to that person, I'm not going to speak to you until you have left the civil service, you have put a period of time between the inquiry and an appointment? I don't think for a potential leader of the country, as Keir Starmer wishes to be, that you can not look at the details surrounding this. And given his background in the legal profession, why would he have not been all over the detail of that to say, this is going to look bad for me and my party, so I'm not going to do it? But he didn't, and I find that quite worrying.
But on the one hand, you can't talk to someone and say, I'm not going to talk to you. You can't talk to someone and simply say, look, you know, we're not going to discuss this here and now, without actually having some form of communication. And as far as I'm aware, that's exactly what he said. He said, look, we'll talk about this in the future, but we cannot talk about it now. You cannot talk about joining me now because you are a senior civil servant. Now, you can't accept to express that by osmosis or secret letters. You've got to actually have some...
But hang on, Stephen. I understand what the point you're making, but Nigel, let me just bring you in for one last time. Does this not call into question... Well, there are bigger questions to be answered about this whole Sue Gray appointment. Does this show that the civil service can never be impartial, really, if Sue Gray was, in fact, having these kind of talks with the leader of the opposition about a job when she was supposedly supposed to be an impartial Mandarin?
Well, I mean, even civil servants can go on to other jobs, and and I think I'm with Steve Pound on this one, that you've got to be having those conversations. The bit that she seems to have got wrong, which is probably technical, is that as a civil servant she should have informed her officials that she was talking to the opposition. That is not allowed to be done in secret. That seems to be the mistake she's made. She wasn't doing this during the time she was investigating Partygate, and she's taken the 6 months that gardening leave that she's been told to before taking up the appointment. So she has followed all those rules. So we're talking about a bit of a technical breach.
But I can't help but think if this was the Conservative Party, a Conservative appointment, that it would be across all the front pages and there'd be accusations of all sorts of corruption, bad behaviour.
It is on the front page.
Pardon? It's on the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. It's not anywhere else. And this sort of story, people have been I think, gaslighting a bit, saying, it's just a damp squib. It's a nonsense story. Sue Gray's Miss Perfect. Keir Starmer would never do anything dodgy at all. It's just Tory sleaze. And I think people are questioning also Keir Starmer's values, proprieties, morals, etc., etc. I think that's fair to say, Stephen.
I don't.
Well, on that bombshell, let's bring you some more on that breaking news regarding Nicola Sturgeon and the ongoing investigation into the SNP party's finances. The former First Minister says she has done nothing wrong, as she told reporters outside her Glasgow home a little earlier. Let's have a little listen. Oh, we are not going to have a little listen. I'm sorry about that. Perhaps we'll have that a little bit later. You are watching and listening to GB News Sunday with me, Emily Carver. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. Now, a big boss of Wix, the DIY store, has said shoppers with trans-critical views are bigots, causing some to boycott the home improvements shop. Will Wix be the latest brand to go woke and go broke? But first, let's take a look at the weather with Jonathan.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to GB News Sunday with me, Emily Carver, on your TV, online and digital radio. Now, listen to this. DIY giant Wix is facing a boycott of its stores after its chief operating officer said shoppers with trans-critical views were bigots and were not welcome in our stores.
Lord,
The homewares, there's Stephen there, the homewares store controversially carried a float at Brighton Bride last year with the slogan, "No LGB without the T," sparking anger from campaigners and activists. Wix share price went down after the comments. Is this another example of go woke, go broke? It's very clumsy. Anyway, joining me now is Peter Tatchell, LGBTQ activist and director of the Peter Tatchell Foundation. This man, this COO of this DIY store, has very much stuck his foot in it. Would you agree, Peter?
I think you're
basing your comments on a misreading of what the boss actually said. He said if people come in the store and behave in a transphobic way towards staff and customers, they were not welcome. So that's very different from the way in which it's been reported and the way in which you just mentioned. I understand you're just following the reports, but those reports are inaccurate. I'm sure you would not want any staff in Wix or any customers in Wix who were trans to be abused by other customers. It's quite right. This is a customer and staff safety issue. And as a responsible employer, Wix is doing the right thing. You know, if he had said racists who come into the store and act in a racist way towards customers and staff, there wouldn't be an outcry. Everyone would applaud him. They'd say it was the right thing. That would be terrible and shocking and unacceptable for customers to come in and treat customers and other staff at Wix in a racist way.
But Peter, so you're saying everything's fine, nothing to see here. He's just reminding people who come through the doors in his shops not to be bigots and not to be transphobic. But he also said, did he not, that many of his customers will be ignorant or bigots themselves. That's not great business, is it?
Well, I think he was just acknowledging that many people are ill-informed about trans issues, partly because of the way in which there's been a very toxic atmosphere over the last few years of demonizing trans people and treating them as threats and predators. They are not.
But Peter, this is where we disagree, Peter. I accept your point of view on this, but I'm not sure there has been this massive demonisation of trans people. I think there has been a debate that has emerged because of conflicts between women's rights, sex-based rights, and those of trans people. I don't think it's been about demonising. I think that's what's used to shut down this very important debate. People say, you're transphobic, you're demonising this whole group of people, blah, blah, blah. And that actually makes it more difficult to have a proper conversation. And we also find that the extremes of the trans activist movement are constantly trying to shut down women who are worried about losing sex-based rights.
Well, they are not representative of most trans people.
Very loud,
I want to assure
this
you
activism.
that all my trans friends and me as a trans ally get constant death threats, threats to rape us, castrate us, and kill us from people who are trans critics. There is bad behavior on both sides. We have to cool it and recognize that most people are decent in the middle and are behaving with courtesy and respect for others. But, you know, when it's said that trans people are a threat to biological women, that is just simply not true. There, of course, have been a few bad apples. There are a few bad trans people, like there's a few bad gay people. But that's no excuse for demonizing the whole community and suggesting that they are a threat. And I think that a responsible business will stand up to defend all their staff and all their customers and take a stand against prejudice. You know, that's the right thing to do. And I think we need more kindness and courtesy in this debate, not these false accusations and misrepresentations of what people have said. And the boss of Wix has been a responsible employer. He wants to protect his staff and customers who happen to be trans. That's a good thing.
Well, thank you very much indeed for your time. Peter Tatchell, director of the Peter Tatchell Foundation and an LGBTQ activist, of course. Claire, your response to this, because I think the problem is that people can call you a transphobe simply because you don't think that a man can change their sex.
It is a really, really toxic debate, and it's a very complicated one. So if you wanted to ask questions about it to understand more, you suddenly get taken down onto one side of the argument or the other, and I find that really, really worrying. I think this story in particular is quite concerning. Why should a DIY store feel the need to publicise to anybody what it's going to do to protect staff and shoppers in their store? Why? We've never had that before. We've never had that for women. going in there. We've never had that for gay people.
That's very true.
So why now do they feel the need to tell everybody that this is what they're doing? Absolutely, you need to look after your staff and shoppers, but you don't need to publicise it at the same time, which has just caused even more division, because here we are on a Sunday afternoon discussing these actions from a store that you only go to when you need to put some shelves up.
You raise a very good point there, Stephen. Someone's just written in, Howard Silk has written in, and I think this sums up a lot of people's frustration with this topic. I, for one, am not transphobic. I don't attack or fear trans people. However, I am very opposed to the trans activists and their attacks on people like Kelly J. Keane. She's a prominent feminist and female rights activist. And I will not shop at Wix due to this statement from the CAO. He is alienating very normal people by saying that if you have transcritical views, i.e. that you think biological sex matters, that you're not welcome there. It's madness.
Poor J.K. Rowling is not going to be able to go in and buy a box of screws. I mean, it's going to be terrible.
Well, I'm not going to be able to. I don't know about Claire, but...
But look, the point is, as we discovered in the Labour Party some years ago, you use the word bigot at your peril, because it's a very, very dangerous...
Gordon Brown.
You have an excellent memory.
Yes.
I wish I'd forgotten it too. But look, the reality is that Wix in the past have been really good. They employ a lot of older people. You know, they don't practice age discrimination. There's a lot of people, you know, even of my age working in Wix. It's very good. But let us turn to beer. I mean, look what happened in America with Bud Light. You remember when they decided to put on their labels a very well-known trans activist saying, you know, I drink, and their sales nosedived. When you say go woke and go broke at Wix's or whatever it was, I think presumably you're referencing this. I think this is, and I say Claire is absolutely right. The word toxic is massively overused. We tend to throw it in everywhere. If ever there's a case of the exemplar of toxicity, it is this debate. And I have to say, I'm with Kathleen Stock and J.K. Rowling, but wasn't it marvellous? But wasn't it marvellous to hear the mellowing of Peter Tatchell? I mean, it must be because the Australians are doing fairly well in the Test match, but...
Now, Peter is very good. He comes on and discusses these topics with people who often very much disagree with him. So I will thank him for that, because it can't be easy, particularly when he vehemently disagrees with a lot of what I say and others as well. But that's what makes for a good debate.
Makes for GB News.
It makes for GB News. We have every side represented constantly, and it's brilliant, and it makes for fantastic conversation. Now, we did reach out to Wix, who released the following statement on behalf of their chief organising officer. It says, everyone is welcome at Wix. We are proud to be an inclusive home improvement retailer and are committed to building a workplace and culture where all colleagues and customers can feel at home. How lovely. You're watching and listening to GB News Sunday with me, Emily Carver. Lots more coming up on the show this afternoon. We'll be getting you all the very latest on the government's migrant housing plans, including the Prime Minister's plan it's inadvertently led to a bigger backlog of newer claims. So he's messed that up. But first, let's get the news with Aaron.
Thanks, Emily. It is 2:31. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Nicola Sturgeon's maintained she's innocent of any wrongdoing after being questioned by police investigating SNP finances last weekend. Scotland's former First Minister spoke as she returned home for the first time since her arrest. She was released without charge.
You know, I can't say very much just now. What I will say is reiterate the statement I issued last Sunday. I am certain that I have done nothing wrong. I intend to be back in Parliament in the early part of the week. I'll make myself available for questions then, obviously within the constraints that I am referring to right now. For now, I intend to go home, catch up with some family. I know I'm a public figure, I accept what comes with that, but I'm also a human being that's entitled to a bit of privacy.
The Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove's apologised for what he's described as unacceptable behaviour at a Conservative staff party during lockdown, saying he's personally sorry. In the video obtained by The Mirror, partygoers can be heard joking about bending the rules, while others dance in front of tables of food and drink. Indoor socialising was banned at the time. 2 of the 24 people in attendance were named in Boris Johnson's resignation honours list. The Met Police says it's aware of the new footage and is considering it. More than 10,000 people have been detected crossing the English Channel in small boats so far this year. Home Office figures have confirmed crossings have increased because of the recent good weather, with more than 2,500 making the journey in the past week. However, the total number of crossings so far this year remains below the equivalent number at this point last year. And more information on all of our stories is on our website, that is gbnews.com.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in their home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to GB News Sunday with me, Emily Carver, on your TV, online and radio. Now, we just spoke to Peter Tatchell about the Wix COO, that's the DIY store, who said that bigoted shoppers concerned about trans rights are not welcome in stores. At least that is the headline. Peter disputed this and says he's just saying something nice. He's just saying that it's an inclusive environment, etc., etc. But you've been getting in touch. Diana says, let's hope footfall drops in their stores. I, for one, will never set foot in any of their stores again. I think the COO of Wix is the one that is wrong here. And also, many of you have been getting in touch, basically, essentially saying, why are they doing this? It's all for, corporate greed, apparently. You make money out of this virtue signalling, and it goes on from there. But a lot of people are saying, no one cares what the Wix boss thinks anyway. But there you go. Now, moving on to something very, very important indeed. The number of people crossing the English Channel in small boats has topped 10,000 so far this year. That's after more than 750 arrived on Friday and yesterday. This is not great news for the government, to say the least, especially considering a major report this week concluded that government efforts to clear the asylum backlog aren't working, and their attempts have actually made the situation worse. That's dealt a major blow to Rishi Sunak's key pledge to end the crossings. The National Audit Office says that by focusing focusing on people who have been waiting for a decision for a long time, it has inadvertently led to a bigger backlog of newer claimants as the illegal migration crisis shows no signs of abating. Claire, I'm reading this. It's inadvertently led to a bigger backlog of newer claims because they've been focusing too much on the longer claims. I can't get my head around that. Can you explain what's happening here?
The claims that have been outstanding for some time will be really complex in nature.
Right.
Will often require security information to come from other countries. So you're reliant upon those countries providing these pieces of detail in a quick time frame. That isn't going to happen in a lot of those cases. So unfortunately, now what we're seeing is if you're trying to then sort out those and unpick those cases, the newer cases coming along, some of whom could be dealt with relatively quickly, are now just sitting in this backlog. The crux of it is they don't have enough people to do these interviews. They don't have a plan on recruiting more people, and they don't have a plan on what you're going to do with those claimants whose claims are found to be inadmissible. So what is going to happen here? So you are going to have this bottleneck of people coming in, no way of sorting that out, no way of processing claims, and nowhere to return people to. So it is going to be an extremely difficult summer for the Prime Minister because the weather is improving, which will encourage more boats to come over.
Stephen, to be a little bit sympathetic to the Home Office, this is a gargantuan task, absolutely massive task. The breaking news today from Mark White, our Home and Security editor, number of people crossing the English Channel in small boats exceeded 10,000 for the year so far, and it's only June. Could any Home Office, anywhere, deal with this?
Well, yes. I mean, you rightly say it's a gargantuan task, but the Home Office is a gargantuan organisation. And let me just point you...
How many staff do we need? How many more additional staff do we need?
We need it. Look, we need enough to, however it takes. In Holland, they can do this. When you arrive in Holland, you are processed within the first 48 hours. And because, don't forget, the Netherlands had a huge empire, very similar to ours in the East Indies, in South America, and so they had a large number of people coming in from Suriname and various other places.
Yeah.
They deal with it. Now, look, I was an MP for 22 years, and I think every single person I knew, including good friends of mine, like Alan Johnson, who was Home Secretary, said that the Home Office has been totally and utterly unfit for purpose as long as anybody can remember. Now, what's happened here is, you're absolutely right, Claire, by working on the older cases, and don't forget, these aren't necessarily complicated cases. These are cases which have been appealed and where people have actually, I know so many cases where, you have a refusal and then come up with another category. So it's very often that. So, look, we're going to have to bite the bullet in this country and recognise we need to have ID cards so that the economic pool isn't there. Because at the moment, you can come to this country, you can work, nobody's going to do anything about it, nobody's going to ask if you have the right to work here, and at the end of 2 years, you can go to Tirana and, build a palace. So we need that. We also need to process asylum applicants early and efficiently, because in all honesty there are certain heartbreaking cases of people who have no alternative but to flee their homeland, and I think as a civilised country we should actually welcome those people. But I'm not prepared to actually see my country go down the tubes for 23-year-old single men from Albania who want to come across here and work in a car wash for 2 years. It's out of order and it's got to stop.
Well, much to add to that, Claire?
Not particularly much to add to that. I do think it is a shocking revelation that the Home Office hasn't been fit for purpose for some time, for many, many decades, and I've always called for immigration to become its own department. It is too big to be in with the rest of the Home Office, which covers security, it covers passports, it covers policing, it covers drugs policy. I think it needs to be carved out. It's not taken seriously enough. It used to be a cabinet position. The immigration minister used to attend cabinet. That was downgraded to a junior minister's role. And look where we are. You need someone to make those decisions, and you need to make them quickly.
Can I ask you something? Because people have very different opinions on this, and it's hard to know what exactly is true. But Stephen touched upon it there. Is the reason it takes so long to process claimants and then to deport people? We see very few people ever get deported, it seems, out of our country. But Claire, go ahead.
OK, there are many, many problems with this, because when you talk about removing people from the country, you need to be able to have a country to send them back to. Now, the three top countries, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, the three countries with the most people coming over by boat, well, how are you going to return them to those countries? There are no agreements in place. You were also potentially sending some people back to their death, which we don't do as a reasonable country. So if you don't have that in hand, what else are you going to do about it? The government did have an idea with Rwanda badly thought through idea. However, if you are going to look at something like that, it needs to be dealt with properly. You need to have that kind of deterrent, if that's what you want it to be, or working with the international community in order to get those people to safety. And that's what no government seems to have really put together at the moment, is a coherent plan to be able to come up with an idea to either process people quickly and remove them, or to be able to move them on and let someone else process it. It just doesn't happen, and nobody has taken that sort of bullet and made it happen, and there seems to be no will in order to do so.
Well, I think the Rwanda policy is probably a good idea, Stephen.
I think it's nonsense. It's a complete
If we were
distraction.
actually able, we were actually able to get those flights off the ground, because it seems like the legal system is acting against the government when it comes to any of these
the
ideas.
government makes the law. I mean, the Israelis sent people to Rwanda. They sent 4,000 people to Rwanda.
And the Germans apparently want the EU to do it.
And how long were they there? You know, they then disappeared after a couple of weeks. Look, the thing about Iran is incredibly important. I used to deal with huge numbers, like scores and scores of cases of people coming from Iran. And in many cases, they were quite mendacious. They would say, you know, I'm here because I'm being persecuted. And then they would say, if they got refused, they'd say, actually, I'm gay. And then that would be investigated. And then they'd say, actually, you know, I'm a Christian. And but in reality, if somebody's coming from Iran and we can't send them back, we should actually be accepting them and working with them. Because rather than wasting everybody's time and money in going through this ludicrous rigmarole of trying to actually send somebody back to a country that you never can. It was like Somalia. There were no planes landing in Somalia. We couldn't do anything about it. But fortunately, we now have a system of a legitimate entry point where people from Somalia who actually have relatives in this country and family reunion, we can actually work it properly.
But it seems like we've got absolutely zero deterrent, and then we haven't got enough people to process these claims, and we're spending millions and millions, and the amount of money we're spending on everything when it comes to asylum, the hotel accommodation, etc., has apparently doubled in the last year from last year. It is just...
Well, what's happening?
It's just...
Look what's happening in the rest of Europe. Look what's happening in Hungary. Look what's happening in Poland. What's happening in the Czech Republic. Look what's happening in Croatia. A lot of people in Europe are just saying, look, if you can't sort the problems out, we will sort the problems out. In some cases, in the most brutal ways.
But it needs...
Listen to what Viktor Orban is saying at the moment. You can't solve the problem, therefore I'm going to solve the problem, and you're not going to like...
Well, we're going to have to... Sorry, Claire. We're going to have to move on to what should have been the top story of today's show. A top Spotify executive has called Harry and Meghan a word beginning with effing grifters after the streaming service pulled the plug on the Sussexes' $20 million podcast. Stephen's shedding a tear. But don't worry, the couple won't be short of cash, because rumours are circulating that Meghan is on the verge of becoming the face of Dior.
Right, I'm stopping buying it.
It's fair to say Spotify's head of podcast innovation, Bill Simmons, is not a fan of the royal couple, previously stating he was embarrassed to be associated with the Duke through their shared employer. But are Harry and Meghan grifters? Joining me now is royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams. Richard, thank you very much indeed for joining me. This is quite an intervention from this chap at Spotify. Damning.
Yes, he is a very colourful figure and apparently has very forthright opinions. And the interpretation of grifters as con artists has not gone down very well, I suspect, with the Sussexes. But the problems are... Firstly, there's little doubt Spotify and the Sussexes and Meghan didn't, with archetypes, make the impression that they were looking for, and clearly this has been a failure. But the rumours that Netflix, they've only done one 6-hour series for Netflix, and there was an idea, an animated series called Pearl, which she was going to be involved with, and that's been pulled. And if that's worth some $100 million, if that deal comes apart, they really are in trouble. And there are all sorts of rumours that we hear a possible one of the faces of Dior, Ari Emanuel, who's the William Morris Endeavour agency, Meghan's agent. He is very well connected, so expect something dramatic, but of course I'm not absolutely certain what.
Well, I had the displeasure of listening to the entirety of the Spotify podcast, or at least most of it, and it was just so patronising. It was all about how Meghan is a victim in all these different ways. She says she was talking about women in general, but she certainly wasn't. It was about Meghan, and it was just a little bit boring and just so predictable. It was the same sort of vacuous conversations that you hear from, the most woke issues you could possibly imagine. It just wasn't a great podcast. But do you think, when it comes to the fact that they can no longer potentially sell information about the royal family, is there anything else they have to offer?
Well, this is the big question. This is precisely what is exercising them with the Spotify problem, with conceivable difficulties with Netflix. And with the fact also the Random House book deal, I mean, this was supposed to be, been talked about 4 books, so Meghan could write her memoirs, Harry could have the other 400 pages he didn't put into the spare, and of course he could write his early childhood too, but hopefully none of that will happen. We simply don't know. But yes, it's very definitely possible that at some point she could go into politics, or some point there could be some reconfiguration of the brand, and there could be a whole lot more offers, because this is what she's hoping with her new agency. So it's a question of waiting to see whether Netflix perhaps do close the deal in the way they would not wish, and if that's the case, what can the agency pull out for them, because they do, as you say, it's this problem of endlessly attacking the royal family and the fact that they get so much mileage. But the facts are, however, anything they do is absolutely fascinating the planet still. The so-called catastrophic car chase in New York, look at the publicity surrounding that. Anything to do with Harry in court, for example. So
that's very true.
They've all everything to play for.
I'm sure they'll find something. I don't think they're going to be living below the bread line, are they, really? But thank you very much indeed, royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams. Now, I'm sure everyone at home has been, bated breath waiting for Stephen Pound's hot take on the royal couple.
Well, I have to say this...
Duchess of Dior.
This Spotify thing, it sounds like the sort of thing you overhear at the chisel counter at Wix, doesn't it? I mean, it does sound a little bit... Harry, protect me, Harry, protect me. This is, I'm sorry, just absolutely token and cringe-making. It really is awful.
Interesting to hear that you were listening to the podcast.
Yeah, well, I only discovered what a podcast was last week. I thought it was something to do with fishing, to be perfectly honest. But I will not be buying any Dior perfume from now on. Sorry.
You're boycotting Dior. What about you, Claire?
I'm so fed up of the whole saga. I have listened to none of the podcasts, so I'm glad you have on our behalf. And
I did it so you and our viewers do not have to.
Exactly.
You took one for the team.
And I'm just fed up. If they want to go and live their life in Montecito, go live your life in Montecito. I don't need to see a programme about it. I don't need to have the patronising childcare points being given to me by Meghan, who has a lot of money and a lot of help around her. So, no. Just go and live your life and leave us be.
You know what's extraordinary? I never thought I'd say this, but I'm actually starting to have some retrospective sympathy for Edward VIII and Wallace Simpson.
Go on, then, tell me.
The previously abdicating royal. Because, he went off and governed Bermuda, and he had certain sympathies with certain regimes that we don't talk about. But the main thing is they then lived in Paris, they kept their heads down, and they're very quiet, and they lived there for about 30 years. And they behaved with a certain amount of dignity. And I think, wouldn't it be lovely if that word dignity could somehow be injected into this unhappy couple's lives? Silence.
It's just so... It's just hard to take, really, that these two of the most privileged people in the entire world, are able to make money off the back of, presenting themselves as victims constantly for all varieties of reasons. Anyway, you've been getting in touch at home on the big boss at Wix, saying that transphobic customers are not welcome in their stores. Richard says, the Wix COO says those who don't agree with him are not welcome in his stores and are bigots. Given that a bigot is someone who is intolerant of others' views, I'd say that stance makes him a bigot. Very clever. Victor says, if the Wix boss is telling me that because I don't think biological men should be allowed in women's safe spaces, I'm not welcome in his shop, fair enough. I won't go into that shop. Well, it is interesting to see that the share price has taken a little bit of a tumble, as we saw with Bud Light. They've certainly done a bit of a Bud Light, Wix has. Keith has to say, I was about to place another order with Wix, but feel I can't proceed because I'm the G in the LGB, which means I'm a bigot in the eyes of Wix. Great shame. Well, there you go. Thank you for sending in all of your views. They are brilliant as always. But today, that's it from me. But stay tuned, because Nana is up next, and Nana has magically appeared here in the middle of my lovely political panels.
I think I've died and gone to heaven.
I know, you have, haven't you? Three lovely ladies.
Bless his heart. Thank you, Stephen. That's very sweet.
Lovely people, persons.
And I must say, a gorgeous,
I'm a woman, darling.
gorgeous dress, Nana.
Oh, thank you. I'm quite jealous of yours. I like your dress as well. I'm going to get
So
that.
tell me what's coming up.
Well, of course, we've got to talk about Nicola Sturgeon. I mean,
Yes.
for God's sake, it's just a mess, isn't it? What's going on with the SNP? I mean, is it sort of curtains for them? Is it time Humza actually just got rid of her and just kind of made a clean break from her? But then, of course, I've got a monologue later on talking about the death penalty.
Oh, goodness me.
Obviously, you know how I feel about it. Executions all round. That's my view. But, you know, I will give you my take on that. And just so much more. We'll be talking about the situation with Partygate and then Sue Gray. Sue Gray has re-emerged again.
Yes, she has. On the front of the Sunday Telegraph, turns out everything was not kosher.
So it's sort of a bit of a nothing to see here with the Labour Party. It's all fine, it's all fine. We can run the country. I'm not so sure. So we'll be looking into the Labour Party and find out whether they're actually... Are they fit to govern?
I think they deserve a little bit of scrutiny.
I think so.
Well, there you go. Stay tuned for Nana's show. You've been watching and listening to GB News Sunday with me, Emily Carver. Thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. And Claire Pearsall and Stephen Pound. Don't go anywhere. Nana is coming up next. But before that, let's take a look at the weather with Jonathan.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. It is an unsettled end to the weekend for many of us, all thanks to an area of low pressure that is centred just to the west of the UK. We do have thunderstorm and rain warnings in force across many areas. There could be some torrential downpours of rain, thunderstorms, lightning and hail possible over the coming few hours. The showers will tend to merge into this longer band of rain through this evening and overnight, pushing northwards across northern England into Scotland, potentially 40-60 millimetres of rain falling in just 3 hours. Really some surface water issues are possible. Turning drier to the south of that, but many areas holding up around 16-15 degrees Celsius, so still quite a humid night. A wet start to Monday across Scotland as this area of rain pushes its way across. Still some surface water issues possible on Monday morning. A dry and brighter start to the new working week elsewhere, but the sunshine will help those showers to develop as we head into the afternoon. Again, the odd rumble of thunder is possible, particularly perhaps across areas of Northern Ireland. A little bit more sunshine in between those showers tomorrow, though, compared to Sunday. Temperatures climbing to highs of 22 to 26 degrees Celsius. As we head into the evening, those showers will gradually fade their way off, taking a little bit of time across northern and western areas, but eventually clear spells developing, some isolated mist and fog patches forming. A bit of cloud lingering across the far southeast. That might make it, again, a bit of a humid night to come here. And into the start of Tuesday, there's potential that we see, again, another band of very heavy rain push its way across southern areas. There is still some uncertainty in regards to the exact details of that, so do keep up to date with the forecast. Low pressure that has been with us, though, is steadily progressing its way northwards, and that's going to allow this area of high pressure to build its way in a bit more as we head towards Thursday. So a drier day to come on Thursday, and also a little bit less humid. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday